Okay, so thinking about a career as a metallurgical manager,
Yeah, it's not what most people picture, I guess.
definitely not your typical desk job, right?
No, not at all.
We're really diving deep into role catchers guides today
Hmm.
to see what it really takes to make it in this field.
Yeah, they've got some great stuff in there.
They break down the skills, the interview tips, even how to use their AI to kind of get ahead.
It's really impressive, honestly, how much they cover.
Yeah, and they don't sugarcoat it either. Like right off the bat, they make it clear this isn't your cushy office gig.
Oh, absolutely. They paint a very, how do I put it, vivid picture of what it's like in a steelmaking plant. It's intense.
Intense in what way? Give us the rundown.
Well, think about it. You've got safety protocols everywhere. You're probably wearing protective gear a lot of the time. It's a demanding environment, potentially hazardous. You're dealing with some serious stuff.
Wow, so forget the suit and tie. This is more like hard hat and steel-toed boots territory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Got it.
But it's not just the heavy machinery and the molten metal, right? What I found interesting from RoleCatcher is that this role is way more multifaceted than people might realize.
Oh, for sure. It's so much more than it seems from the outside.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, for one, you're often handling production scheduling. And that means understanding deadlines, making sure you've got the resources you need, just keeping everything running on track. It's a lot to juggle.
So you're almost like a conductor, but instead of an orchestra, it's this whole flow of metal production you're orchestrating.
That's a great way to put it. And just like a conductor needs to know how each instrument plays its part, you've got to work with engineering, maintenance, quality assurance, all these different teams.
Wow, so you need some serious coordination skills on top of the technical know-how.
Absolutely. And they emphasize, RoleCatcher does, that it's a high-stakes environment. You're constantly learning new technologies,
Right.
adapting to industry trends. It's not for everyone, that's for sure.
Definitely not for the faint of heart.
Not at all.
Yeah.
You've really got to be someone who thrives under pressure, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like you need that genuine passion for the science and art of metallurgy to really excel.
100%. That drive to keep learning, to push the boundaries of what's possible with metal, that's what sets the great ones apart.
Absolutely.
So you need the right stuff to land a job like this, right?
Yeah. What are we talking about here? What does RoleCatcher say about the qualifications and skills you need?
Well, you might think it's all about that fancy degree.
Sure, makes sense.
And don't get me wrong, a background in materials science or metallurgical engineering, that's definitely common. But they make it clear it takes more than just having that piece of paper, you know?
Oh, absolutely. So what's the secret sauce? What are employers looking for beyond the degree itself?
Experience. Hands-on experience. And RoleCatcher really drives that point home.
Okay, so how do they suggest getting that experience, especially while you're still studying?
Internships, for one. Get involved in research projects while you're still in school. It's that whole thing of you can read about metal in a textbook all day long.
Right.
But it's not the same as actually melting it, casting it, forging it, you know?
Totally. It's one thing to ace a test on the properties of steel, but it's another thing entirely to be down on the factory floor seeing how it all works in action.
Exactly. It's bridging that gap between the theory and the actual practice. And that's where those, what RoleCatcher calls power skills, come in.
Oh, yeah, I saw that in the guide. What were those again?
So we're talking about things like monitoring, judgment, people management, that kind of stuff.
Which, honestly, those are valuable in any field, right?
Oh, absolutely. These are transferable skills, for sure.
Yeah.
But they really take on a whole new meaning when you're talking about something as complex and demanding as a steelmaking environment. You know what I mean?
Right, because it's one thing to manage a team in like a regular office setting, but we're talking about a steel mill here. Massive scale processes, extreme temperatures, potentially dangerous materials. So how does RoleCatcher break down those power skills within that specific context? I'm curious.
They get surprisingly specific, which I really appreciated. Like, take monitoring, for example. They talk about the importance of understanding these key performance indicators, KPIs they're called in the industry.
KPIs, got it. And what are those in the context of metallurgy?
So things like your production output, how much you're actually making, your quality control metrics, making sure everything meets the standards, even something like energy consumption, how efficiently you're using resources. It's about being able to track all those different metrics, see the trends, and catch any potential issues before they snowball into big problems.
Oh, so you're almost like a detective in a way.
Kind of, yeah.
Instead of looking for clues at a crime scene, you're looking for those subtle red flags in the data that tell you something might be off.
Yeah, you really need that eye for detail, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So that's monitoring. What about judgment? What does that look like in action?
So judgment in this field often means making tough calls,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes you got to do it with limited information under a lot of pressure. Like imagine a crucial piece of equipment malfunctions.
Oh, okay.
That's a high-pressure situation. The metallurgical manager might need to assess the situation really quickly, weigh the risks and benefits of different options, and make a decision, like right then and there. And that decision could have a huge impact on production, on safety, on the company's bottom line.
Wow, no pressure, right?
Right. Talk about high stakes.
It sounds like it takes a special kind of person to handle that kind of pressure, to balance that technical knowledge with that, I don't know, that gut instinct to make the right call in the moment.
Exactly. And we can't forget people management, because it's not just about managing those processes. It's about managing people, right?
Mhm.
You're responsible for the team, motivating them, creating a culture of safety, making sure everyone's working together. RoleCatcher really emphasizes that human element, which is really important.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You think of metallurgy, you think of like hard science, very technical, but they're saying that being able to lead and inspire a team, that's just as crucial for success, especially in such a demanding environment.
Oh, 100%. You can be the most brilliant metallurgist in the world, but
Yeah.
if you can't lead a team, it's not going to go well.
That's so true.
And that kind of ties into another point RoleCatcher brings up: language.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so we're not just talking about being able to communicate clearly with your team, although obviously that's important.
Right, that goes without saying.
But you're also talking about being fluent in the technical language of metallurgy.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
you got to be comfortable with all those acronyms, the industry-specific jargon, all that stuff that probably sounds like a foreign language to anyone who's not in the field.
Give me an example. What's a word that RoleCatcher uses that someone outside this world might not understand?
Okay, how about microstructure?
Microstructure. Okay.
So that refers to the internal structure of the metal. You analyze it under a microscope. It's like you're looking at this hidden world within the metal. And that microstructure, it influences all the properties of the metal itself.
Fascinating.
Right. They also talk about things like alloy composition,
Uh-huh.
basically. That's like the recipe of different metals that are combined. And then you've got phase transformations, which is how the metal structure changes at different temperatures. It gets pretty in-depth.
So RoleCatcher does a good job of sprinkling in those key terms so that by the time you finish reading their guides, you're not just familiar with the concepts, but you can actually hold your own in a conversation with like seasoned metallurgical engineers.
Exactly. It's about sounding the part as much as knowing the part. And trust me, that can make a huge difference, especially when you're in a job interview or you're working on a big project with other engineers.
Right. It shows you're serious. You're not just dipping your toes in the water. You're invested in this world.
Exactly. It's like, okay, so you've been studying, you've got some experience under your belt.
Right. You're fluent in microstructure now.
Exactly. What's the path look like? How do you actually become a metallurgical manager?
Yeah. Where do you even begin?
Well, RoleCatcher, they've got a really clear breakdown of the typical career trajectory.
Okay. I like that. Lays it all out.
All right.
So what's step one?
Usually you're starting as an entry-level metallurgical engineer. Pretty self-explanatory.
Makes sense. Then you kind of work your way up, right?
That's it. You go from entry-level to junior engineer, then senior engineer, and finally you reach the peak metallurgical manager.
So it's helpful to see that whole progression, especially for someone who's just starting to explore this field. But what I found really interesting is that RoleCatcher, they don't just give you the job titles. They actually tell you what each stage entails, what you should be focusing on.
Oh yeah, they get into the nitty-gritty.
So let's say you land that entry-level position. What's the name of the game at that point? What should you be doing to really impress?
It's all about learning, absorbing everything you can. You're assisting the senior engineers, getting your hands dirty with all the tests and experiments, really solidifying what you learned in school, seeing how it all works in the real world.
Okay, so it's like a real-world crash course, basically.
Exactly. But here's what I found interesting. Even at that early stage, RoleCatcher, they really emphasize that continuous improvement mindset.
What do you mean by that?
So you're not just there to follow instructions.
Yeah.
You're expected to think critically, maybe even suggest ways to make things better, more efficient, even at the entry level.
So be proactive, show some initiative.
100%. That proactive problem-solving attitude, it goes a long way, even as an entry-level engineer. Then, as you progress, become that junior engineer, you're given more ownership. You're analyzing data, you might be troubleshooting problems, collaborating more directly with other teams.
Okay, so more responsibility, higher stakes.
Exactly. And get this, RoleCatcher actually is an example of a junior engineer who has a Lean Six Sigma certification.
Hold on, Lean Six Sigma, isn't that like pretty advanced stuff? I mean, for someone who's still relatively new to the field, isn't that a lot?
It can be intense, but it's becoming more and more valuable in this field.
So what is it exactly? Break it down for us.
So Lean Six Sigma, it's all about making things more efficient, streamlining processes, reducing waste. It's a methodology they use across a bunch of industries, and having that certification, it shows employers you're serious about improving things, you're not content with just the way things are.
So it's like a way of signaling, hey, I'm not just here to do the bare minimum. I'm here to excel. I'm here to make a difference.
Exactly. And, it's not just about how many years you've been in the field.
Yeah.
It's what you've done during that time, the initiative you've taken to develop those in-demand skills.
Makes sense. So then you reach that senior metallurgical engineer level. What does RoleCatcher say about that stage?
That's when you really transition from managing projects to leading them. You're the expert, the one everyone goes to for advice.
Okay, so you've really got to know your stuff at that point.
Oh, yeah. You're mentoring those junior engineers, tackling the really tough technical challenges. You might even be driving innovation within your area of expertise. RoleCatcher even gives an example of a senior engineer with a PhD, just to highlight how that deep expertise is often expected at that level.
Wow, so it's like years of experience plus that advanced education. It all comes together at that senior engineer stage.
Right. And even at that top level, when you're the metallurgical manager, RoleCatcher emphasizes that collaboration's still key. You're overseeing production, making sure all those different departments are on the same page.
Right, which you can't do in a silo. You got to be able to work with people, build those relationships.
Exactly. And here's the thing, throughout all these career stages, RoleCatcher really stresses the importance of continuous learning, showcasing your expertise. It's not enough to just climb that ladder. You got to be active.
So what are some of the ways they suggest doing that? What are some things that aspiring metallurgical managers can do to stand out?
Certifications are big, like that Six Sigma we talked about. Presenting your work at conferences, maybe even publishing articles in industry journals. It's all about building your reputation.
So it's not just about being good at your job. It's about becoming a known expert, someone people look up to in the field.
Exactly. And that's where a platform like RoleCatcher can be so valuable, because it's not just about finding a job. It's about positioning yourself for success, building that profile, highlighting your skills.
Right. It's like they're saying, look, a career in metallurgy, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And you need the right tools and resources to navigate their journey successfully.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into the world of metallurgy. We've gone from the factory floor all the way up to that coveted manager role. We've talked about the skills, the qualifications, the career path, and even some of the tools that can give you an edge in this competitive field.
It's a fascinating field. And honestly, I think RoleCatcher does a fantastic job of breaking it all down.
They really do. So to everyone listening, if you're passionate about science, if you love the idea of working with your hands and your mind to solve complex challenges, a career in metallurgy might be the perfect fit for you. Keep exploring, keep learning, and who knows where your passion might lead you. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.